Okay, everybody, I got him back. The man behind Smoky Mountain Wrestling. We got the rematch this time. It didn't take us as long as the first time, and I'm very happy to welcome back to Booking the Territory Pro Wrestling Podcast, the unprofessional wrestling podcast, as many have dubbed it these days. The one and only Jim Cornette. Jim, how you doing tonight, man?
Mike, thank you for having me back. First of all, I enjoyed the first time, or I wouldn't be doing it again. I'll promise you that. And if it's an unprofessional podcast, that means that we're strictly winging this out of the crack of our ass. There's no preparation whatsoever. So right before we went on the air, I said, "Here's the thing. I'll follow you, but hopefully I'll remember what the fuck it is that you're talking about."
Well, let's.
It's now things are starting. I'm glad I kept good records, but I can't reach all my file cabinets right now. I'm going to try to do this off the top of my head, but I'm glad I kept good records because as I get older, the brain starts softening up and things start to blur together. So if you ask me, I'm going to drop some knowledge here. You ask me a question and I'll either give you a pithy answer or a pissy answer.
I hear that, Jim. Well, we'll go from the top. So first thing I wanted to touch base with you on, we were recently doing Starrcade 1986, Night of the Skywalkers. And before actually Starrcade, I think it's about 2 weeks before, they air a Midnight Express scaffold match training video. Yeah, there you go. So, me and Doc and Harper, my two illustrious co-hosts, are doing the show, and we can't stop laughing because Bobby Eaton is heard several times during the training session. Jimmy, I ain't going up there. Jimmy, I ain't going up there.
Yeah.
As you yell at him to climb it, and they're putting on such a great performance. They don't want to do it. Now I know these guys had done scaffold matches before. However, what was it like recording that Midnight Express scaffold match training video for NWA Saturday Night at that time?
Well, that was the thing is that we were it was set up in the old Charlotte Coliseum, now the Bojangles Coliseum. But it was in Charlotte because obviously that's where we live and that's where the office was. And I'm trying to remember if they even had anybody really from the office, because it's not like Dusty was not going to come down there to where they set the scaffold. Klondike Bill set the fucking scaffold up, right? And whoever he had. I know he was there, and they sent the camera down. It's Jackie Crockett, I'm pretty sure, and Doug Dillinger might have wandered by or whatever. But it's not like Dusty and the whole office is going to come down and shoot this thing. So I can't remember. They may have just told us beforehand, go down and shoot the promo. JJ might have come or whatever. Maybe Jackie's delivered a message. Okay, but basically the gist of it when we went into it was, cut a promo where Bobby's the one that's scared and don't want to go up there. And Bobby's the one I always abused. See, I couldn't get away with doing it. Dennis, you couldn't push Dennis around or it would have buried Dennis, right? But you could push Bobby around and it actually gave Bobby more heat because we had the dynamic that in the relationship. So we just concocted, okay, roll the goddamn tape and I'll cut the promo and Bobby will be scared to go up there and Dennis don't really want to. And, and we did it. I don't even remember if we did 2 takes.
That's what I was going to ask, if it took more than one or if y'all just let it roll one time and it was good to go.
Well, in those days, and once again, who was producing me? I wasn't going to, sometimes I'd say, oh, if it was on pre-tape, I can do something better. Let me do it again. But I don't, because they didn't want to have to be climbing up and down. I'd get heat if I fucking botched the thing. So back in those days, unless you cussed or just completely quit speaking English and began having a series of small strokes verbally, they left the camera rolling, so.
Yeah.
But I'm glad people remember. But to me, the great one, I didn't think that was any of our greatest work. But the great one was the Road Warriors and Ellering up there with the pumpkins.
Yes. Oh my God, that was. We were talking about that recently too, where they're splattering the pumpkins on the ground and they writing Bobby's name and Dennis's name on it. It's on the network. It's not as good because they've got that dubbed over music and not the actual Road Warrior music, but. Yeah, we were talking about that, how they climbed up. All three of us agree. We're not climbing up those things. We're like, hell with that. And I don't know if you remember this with the Express when y'all did that tape. At the end of it, Bubba scales the scaffold and walks across it like he's just having a stroll through the park. where like he has no fear. Big
Yeah.
Bubba has no. Did you remember him climbing in at the end and walking straight across, and he's just like, I'm just going for a stroll in the park.
Yeah, he just wanted to see what, you know. But now here's the thing. Going back a second to the pumpkins. This is an example of the psychology of the thing. Everybody remembers, if we had been the ones with the pumpkins up there, yeah, Road Warriors, this is what you're going to look like. And we throw those pumpkins on and boom, and boom. And the Road Warriors had just gotten they were actually on a real construction scaffold, so they looked rougher, right? And also it was way high up there above the parking lot. But if they just cut the promo up there, we're going to kill you, it would have thrown the whole thing off. We were the heels. We had to be scared. We had fucked them up. As a matter of fact, a lot of people may not remember because you watch things out of context on the internet these days.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why the scaffold match came into being was that on TV, on Atlanta TV, on TBS, we had jumped the Road Warriors and used my loaded racket to fucking beat them into insensibility and injure Hawk's back. And they'd been gone for a month, and that never happened. Nobody ever in those days, and then a couple years later, they did a thing with the Powers of Pain where they fucking hit them with the barbell, but nobody'd ever hurt the Road Warriors.
Yep.
Ever. And injured them, and they'd gone anywhere. So Dusty concocted that. Of course, they went to Japan for, 4 weeks for about 20 grand for fucking Baba. No, wait a minute. What am I saying? Fucking 20, more like 40 probably. But anyway,
Jeez.
I digress. So they go to Japan, and the deal is they have to come back in an ultimate match to get revenge, and that was part of the deal. We were going to be in a feature match at the biggest NWA event of all time, and they did an injury angle for that to get heat on us so they could come back and beat us, and we all get the big payoff. Imagine how these things used to work out like that. Imagine that.
It's so simple.
But the point is, if we had not been the ones scared for our lives, then it wouldn't have worked. And if they had not been the ones illustrating to the people what we would look like when we were thrown off the scaffold and smashed into bits, and that's what people wanted to see. They were able to take advantage of the fact that our little weaselly asses had more heat than anybody else on the fucking roster. And the people legitimately, many of them wanted to see us, if not killed, then thrown off and hurt and crippled and taken away in an ambulance. So that's why that thing worked. It's a shitty match. But just the people wanted so bad to see us fall off that thing in any way and see somebody get hurt. And by God, never let it be said that Jim Cornette does not give the people what they want.
I was watching it not even a week ago, and I watch you fall, and I go, oh, you can see the knee just buckle. I was like, oh, damn. And I've heard you tell a story about how Bubba was supposed to catch you, and he kind of was too far back. And
well,
it
wasn't even a catch, but more of a break of the fall. But I just went, I plummeted straight past him like goddamn, looked like Wile E. fucking Coyote coming off that goddamn thing.
When you watch Bobby and Dennis fall, though, too, I think Bobby fell all right, but Dennis, when he fell, I thought he almost looked like he got injured.
No, Dennis Condrey is the only guy I've ever seen that could take the scaffold bump right and not get hurt. And Bobby sprained his ankle on this right before, which people don't remember because I blew my fucking knee and was surgerized immediately afterwards. But when Bobby goes down, on his swinging from the apparatus, he got swinging a little too far and got and I think right leg down first, and he sprained his ankle. But Dennis Condrey could take that goddamn bump where it looked like it hurt him, but it really didn't. If you watch every time Dennis came off that scaffold, he lets go with both feet headed straight down, and he lands in like almost a catcher's crouch where both feet are out, and boom, and immediately somehow takes a flat back bump, and it looks like it works. And so he lands on his feet and then goes to his back, but it would sell in convulsions. And it wasn't falling into bed, but he didn't get injured.
Right.
And it looked good, and people bought it. But Bobby would come off in any fucking direction. Cause see, I did it the once, but I watched those guys. We did, I think, a dozen of them with the Rock and Roll in Mid-South, and that was a 16-foot scaffold. And then obviously the Starcade, I'm sorry, it was a 20-foot scaffold, 16 feet off the ring.
Right.
Starcade was 20 feet off the ring. So then when they had the house show returns on those, with the Road Warriors and the Midnight, which since I was recovering from surgery, they didn't ask me to do it again.
Thank God, right?
Yeah, but the guys they did another 8 or 10 of those then, and then we did them with the Fantastics.
Yeah.
And it was Rock and Roll Express. And the problem is they're not good matches. And I mean, it was with the Rock and Roll and the Fantastics, it was obviously easier than with Hawk and Animal, although they were 300-pound guys. They would have been seriously injured if they'd ever attempted to take that bump, much less done it by accident, right?
Yeah.
But we wanted to have a better performance, but I guess in a way it's a compliment that not only do when people think of scaffold matches, they think of the Midnight Express, because they were the guys that were athletic enough to do it and had heat enough where people didn't mind seeing a crummy match as long as we got hurt. You know, so that's kind of a compliment. They will pay to see us get it. It doesn't even need to be entertaining. We just need to get hurt. And they're going to be happy. That's how much heat we fucking had. So, and as a matter of fact, just recently on my podcast, the Jim Cornette Experience, for the Cult of Cornette listeners out there, we were going over some facts and figures on NWA business. To this day, the biggest indoor gate that the NWA ever drew in the city of Philadelphia at Civic Center was $166,500 sellout at raised prices in January '87 for the Midnight and the Road Warriors in the Scaffold rematch from Starrcade.
I'll be darned.
They just wanted to fucking see us die, and they chanted for months afterwards. The people chanted Pumpkinhead at us. So when we would go out, and once the babyface would get in the ring, whoever we worked with didn't have to be the Road Warriors because they just liked the promo of and us being called Pumpkinhead. So all the babyface had to do was just stand in the corner and clap their hands because the people were chanting Pumpkinhead while we screamed and cried for them not to for 3 or 4 minutes in most places. It made the match easier because the people are screaming as loud as they can and we're not doing anything. So what the fuck?
Oh, back when it was great. That's amazing. That's some good stuff, Jim. Thanks for sharing that with me, man. So, Jim, can we switch? Can we switch up now and go to Smoky Mountain?
We can do anything you want. We can do anything.
I gotta ask. We were recently reviewing a Smoky Mountain Wrestling episode, and it's from August of '93. And you are in bed, surrounded by stuffed animals, with Dr. Tom and Jimmy Del Rey consoling you after Bob Armstrong got even with you at the K-Town Showdown. I gotta know, how many takes did those scenes take? Because I know there's about 3 or 4 of them with Jimmy Del Rey right there playing with the stuffed animals and acting like a complete clown as you cut promos on Bullet Bob. How long did this had to take a long time.
No, actually, that was my bedroom at my house in Orstown. I didn't usually keep that many stuffed animals right around me in bed, but that was my ex's collection. And our cameraman from Tennessee Production Center, I think it was Kevin Johnson at that point in time, it came up with the camera, and we did it in about an hour, all at 4 of them, counting in between when I would talk to the boys about, okay, this will be the following week, or check my notes or whatever. What it was obviously Bob Armstrong had gotten even with me.
Right.
And you know, we had done the money back guarantee stipulation where if he did not send me to the same hospital in the same ambulance that I sent him to back in May at the Volunteer Slam, he would refund the money of every man, woman, and child who bought a ticket to see the match in the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. And we ended up, that was our record house to that point in time. We had previously, the best we had done in Knoxville, which was a tough nut to crack. We'd been running since May of 92. And this was August of 93, and we had not done above $10,000. And we'd actually done kind of, things had come along a little bit better in Johnson City in relation, and we had already done that big Bluegrass Brawl in Pikeville where we did $12,000-$13,000 and sold out that spring. So our first year, Knoxville was lagging. That's why I did that stipulation, and that's why I did that whole. Not only I'd always intended for me and Bob Armstrong to have a program and for him to come back to the ring, and I held it at least a year, because if you didn't, it wouldn't mean anything. But at that point, we need to draw some money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's why I'd envisioned that Johnson City that year got a Rage in a Cage match with the Armstrong's Army and my guys, the Bruise Brothers and the Bodies. So they had a good main event there and et cetera. But I wanted to see what the fuck with Knoxville, right? And I kind of stole from what Dusty did with me and Ronnie Garvin. And when Jimmy Garvin switched babyface and they reunited the Garvin brothers because I'd set fire to Ronnie Garvin's face, Valentine's Day, 1987 in the Charlotte Coliseum.
Mm-hmm.
Then I go to Hawaii on my honeymoon, my first marriage, and I come back and find out I'm booked in Charlotte in a cage with Ronnie Garvin in a single match. I'm like, fuck. But I pumped it and worked it and did the whole thing, and it ended up drawing. So anyway, we ended up doing $18,000, almost double our previous house, and closing in on 2,700 to 2,800 people, something like that, at our ticket prices back then. So we got them. Well, now I've got to start from scratch, though. And also September every year was traditionally probably the worst house in Knoxville, to the point where I think a year or so, 1 or 2 years, we actually just did a sold show at the fair, at the Tennessee Valley Fair, because September, back to school, etc.
Yeah.
So I knew I was starting from scratch. So I said, all right. Plus I had the goddamn SummerSlam where I was managing Yokozuna that year. So anyway, it's a long, drawn-out way of saying, instead of being on TV in person, just right on, I've been hospitalized. I'm going to go away. How can we miss you if you won't go away? I didn't want them to miss me, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just did the pre-tapes and skipped a whole taping on camera, and that way, and then that's when I brought in Terry Funk for the first time, because I thought, well, this isn't going to draw, even with Terry, because it's September, but then I will start the next chapter in this thing. And of course, then by the following summer, the Night of Legends, the Funk Brothers were in the main event, and we did our record house of 40 grand. We doubled it. So anyway, but the pre-tapes in bed, and I'm a whiny little bitch.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about how I'm going to find somebody to get even, and then I'm going to, and we're going to do this and that to the Armstrongs, and in the meantime, the Heavenly Bodies, who I'm their meal ticket, because I'm allegedly a rich little putz. So even though I'm a complete putz, they've got to pamper and baby me. And of course, when you're smart to the business, or when you knew the personalities involved, you knew Jimmy Del Rey, it's fucking hilarious. But we're not acknowledging in any way that this should be entertaining. This is supposed to be a self-indulgent Donald Trump-like fucking rant from this asshole fat manager who's finally gotten his ass kicked by Bullet Bob Armstrong and now has to start from scratch on trying to get even. So it works for both audiences. And that's something that I don't know if you guys fully understand today. You don't have to acknowledge that everybody knows it's a work, even if you're trying to be entertaining. But anyway, so that's what that was for. And we did those for like 4 weeks. And then I showed up. The only place I was in public that month was, I had to be at SummerSlam. But I wore the neck brace. And it was 2 weeks after the Knoxville match or whatever the fuck, but I wore the fucking neck brace on SummerSlam and on Regis and Kathy Lee, if you remember that, the morning of SummerSlam. Me and Yokozuna and Fuji, to promote the pay-per-view, were in New York on Live with Regis and Kathy Lee. And
I didn't remember that.
Yes, as a matter of fact, they reran it. They reran it twice, and I got a check for like, I put a $612.42, whatever scale, whatever it was. But yeah, I wore the neck brace on the Regis and Kathy Lee show, because I told him, I said, hey, I'm doing this at the WWF office. I'm doing this angle in Knoxville, and so I'm going to have to be wearing a neck brace at SummerSlam. And I said, okay. And then they ended up getting the Regis and Kathy Lee booking. I said, well, so I'm out there. And so I actually got to plug. What's that? Well, I got dropped on my head in Knoxville a couple of weeks ago on Regis and Kathy Lee. For the people at home in Knoxville, they're going, oh, fuck. We were there.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I had no clue. I never saw that.
I actually said, I'm sorry, but what am I supposed to do? Expose the whole goddamn wrestling business in the city of Knoxville, Tennessee,
right,
and bankrupt myself? I'll be there. I'll move around. I'll do everything I'm supposed to do, but I'm wearing a neck brace, and
Yeah.
and there you go.
You got to do what you got to do. So I've been wanting to ask you
It
this.
got me more heat. They couldn't figure out whether it was a neck brace or a flea collar.
I've been wanting to ask you. We're talking about Jimmy Del Rey here, and I don't know if you may have answered this before, because Lord knows you've cut a million podcasts at this point between the drive-through and the experience. Was anyone else considered to be Dr. Tom's tag team partner besides Jimmy Del Rey when Stan left?
No.
No, so he was the only one.
Yes. You know why?
Why is that?
Because, as Thunderbolt Patterson said one time on Atlanta TV, if I only had time. Stan just decided, Jimmy, fuck, I'm done. What? I'm done. Well, where are you going to work? No, I mean, I'm done with the whole wrestling business. I'm quitting wrestling. What?
Yeah.
So if the I'm trying to think, was it the middle of April? I think it was. Basically, he came to me and said, yeah, he said, I'm quitting. I'm quitting the business. I'm going to get hurt. I love Stan, but he was having some kind of midlife crisis because, my God, look at him. Genetically, he's a freak. He looks 20 years younger than he is physically and facially and everything at every point in his life he has.
Right.
But he didn't really love the business anymore and didn't want, he got that point. So we were just kind of finishing up the March shows, which March in Knoxville and John City and everything was usually pretty good. And I believe that year was the 3-team program with Stud Stable and Rock and Roll Express, and we'd brought Arn in and everything. So I said, it was the middle of, I said, April 15th. I said, do the Bluegrass Brawl, because that was that 3-team 9-man street fight, that wild ass thing, right?
Yeah, that was great.
I said, do that. I said, and then in Johnson City, we'll have the loser leaves town match. And I remember I even gave him the 10 days off before that, or a week or whatever, where for a couple weekends where it was supposed to be the bodies and the rock and roll. I said, fuck it. And I just worked with Tom, and we announced Stan couldn't be there, and they beat me on the spot show, so I didn't have to pay anybody else. But when he had told me that's a month away, right? Not even.
Right.
And I'm like, shit. But Kevin Sullivan was there, and I told him what was going on. And I said, where am I going to find a fucking heavenly body? Right.
Right.
And, once again, I'm not trying to air Stan out, but at first I had spent a year setting this territory up where originally the top heel team was supposed to be the Midnight Express, but they ended up keeping Bobby when we were convinced. The Herd tried to run Bobby off every year. We were all there together, but once that we had left or were waiting on Bobby, he kept him.
I remember you saying that.
So then it became the Heavenly Bodies, and then when I'd spent 12 weeks building them on TV, Stan comes in with that fucking pelt sewed to his head, that hairpiece.
Jesus.
and I'm, oh my God, and my heart palpitated on that because he's doing the headgear gimmick, and we worked the stomper, inner ear, don't make noise gimmick, because he's literally got his hair strapped onto his head. With
yes.
So then that went by the wayside, and then he decided to quit the business. I'm like, fuck, this is snake bit, right? And little did I know Heavenly Bodies are about to be goddamn national television stars. I'm thinking that the fucking gimmick's over.
Right.
So anyway, I tell Kevin, what the fuck is it? And I can't do Kevin with the Boston Bay. Jimmy, I got that guy.
Yeah.
I got that guy. Well, he doesn't talk like that, but
Right. No, I got you.
Jimmy Backlund. Jimmy Del Rey had been working for years. We had worked with him. We'd been to Florida on shows with him. He did jobs for us on Atlanta TV a time or two in the early 80s when the Midnight first got to Atlanta as little skinny, red-haired Jimmy Backlund.
Yep. He did some in Mid-South too, Jim. He did some jobs there as well.
Yeah, but that had been the mid-'80s, and now it's 1993, and Kevin, he said, he's gained weight since you've seen him, Jimmy. Jimmy, I don't know who that sounds like, but it don't sound like Kevin.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's gained weight, but he takes all the bumps. He works his ass off. This guy wants to get over. He did, and Kevin had recommended a number of guys. I said, all right, tell him he's the new Heavenly Body. He needs to be here for TV on April 17th, the Monday after the fucking last Tangle in Tennessee. And as a matter of fact, the lady in Johnson City last night, I took Stan's robe that I had made for the bodies. I took it back from him. I had the S taken off and a J put on the front of it because the robe fit Jimmy too. Well, the thing cost like $1,000 fucking dollars or whatever. I'm trying to get the fucking gimmick over. I went. The woman that did Sting stuff from Dallas made the original Heavenly Bodies stuff.
Oh, okay, okay.
So, but that's what it was. I mean, Kevin, I think he had Jimmy send me a tape up, but I mean, I knew he could take bumps and shit, and I thought, well, I can fucking talk. And, you know, this guy's a good worker. He's been around for, 10 years more. So, but it, once again, it succeeded beyond my expectations.
He was perfect, Jim. I mean, he comes in and just, ladies, the line is to the right, and he's missing a tooth. It's hard to describe how he fits in, and I don't think you can like I've watched it now and obviously watched a lot of it, but you'll never replace Stan, obviously, in my opinion, but he fit the Heavenly Bodies because he was so ridiculous with it, and that's what worked.
He was actually better than Stan in the Heavenly Bodies because of the stature of the Midnight Express. When they saw Stan Lane and Tom Pritchard, they saw and me, and they said, well, there's Cornette and Lane from the Midnight Express with a new partner.
Yeah, that's a good point.
With Jimmy, and I mean, they'd seen Tom. Tom was over in Knoxville, but once again, it wasn't to the level of the Midnight. So with Tom and Jimmy, and especially when they went to the WWF, brand new guys that people hadn't seen and didn't have preconceived notions about. So Jimmy was better than Stan in the Bodies for that reason. But also, he worked his ass off. I mean, if he destroyed his body, he already was taking crazy bumps and everything anyway, but he worked his ass off every show. He approached like a goddamn big thing because he wanted to get over, and he had been waiting for a chance at a main event pushed spot in a fucking TV territory for 10 fucking years since Florida had gone under when he'd been a preliminary guy.
Right. So
he wasn't going to pass. And then he comes in, and fucking 2 months later, we go to the WWF. That's what ruined him. He gets a break. He thought Knoxville was like his big break. 2 months after he fucking comes to Smoky Mountain Wrestling, he's debuting on Monday Night Raw.
That's amazing.
So all of a sudden it became, and was a better worker than, looked horrible physically, but that was part of the fucking deal, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Little bastard. But he suddenly became the star high school jock who's now going to the fraternity parties and trying to get in over with the boys in the locker room and everything, which led to Jimmy having issues with the office and various outside the ring, even though he was a great performer in it. He
right.
A little too quick, all that.
Yeah, things can happen too quickly for you sometimes, even though he waited 10 years. But
he was perfect for territory wrestling. He was perfect for Knoxville. He's perfect for a group of 16 guys, and me running the place where everybody's in the wrestling business and they know about everybody's little quirks. Don't make newspapers and, fucking make us look bad or whatever, but everybody's a goddamn nut here's in their own way. And he, and went to the, corporate wrestling too quick.
Yeah, old Jimmy Del Rey. Perfect for the Bodies, though, like you said. Jim, at Volunteer Slam 93, there was a Coward Waves the Flag match with Tracy Smothers and Dirty White Boy Tony Anthony. Outside the ring with a white flag was Tim Horner in Tracy Smothers' corner. And it was supposed to be Ron Wright out there with the Dirty White Boy, but it ended up being Don Wright. I wanted to ask you, why was Ron not there that night? Did something happen? We were kind of curious because it was set up on TV that Ron would be there, obviously, but it ended up being Don. So I'm curious to what happened. You know
what? Well, I am too now that you mention that, because now I faintly remember that. Well, I mean, obviously, if it was Don there instead of Ron, you know this. You know what? It could have been something, because that's when Ron was still living over in Raleigh.
Oh, okay.
And North Carolina. He had moved over there, and that's why we didn't try to impinge on his, patience and everything. It wasn't like he was doing this to retire. He was doing us a favor. He would make the Knoxville or Johnson City when we asked him to, and he made every TV. And otherwise than that, unless it was big string of shows in the summer or whatever. Ron didn't make the other shows because he, like I said, was not doing it to support himself and was doing it as a favor to us.
Right.
And also because he sometimes would ride over with Bob Caudle because they were both over in North Carolina there when they go to TV. But anyway, it could have been something as simple as, I remember, seems like one time Ron called up and said, I'm sick, I'm deathly ill or whatever, or it could have been something with his car at the last minute or whatever. And Tony knew everybody's number, and then Ron would have given it to us anyway, but he said Don can do it. So it was Don there. It just and that's not a bad thing. Where else can you get the fucking noted brother of the guy that's supposed to be in the corner?
Right.
You know, everybody knew Don was too. So I think it's something like that. And actually, that's first I've thought of it in 24 years now, 5.
Yeah, it was like I said, it was really weird. And I was like, I thought just in my mind, I was like, maybe something happened to Ron that day. Maybe he got in an accident. Maybe, you know, I just started like trying to think of, because I mean, things like that happen in the wrestling business. I mean, you're traveling all those roads. It's easily possible. You know, I'm sure traveling, I've never had to travel in the mountainous area like that. And I can only imagine how,
but yeah, I mean, I think it was something. I think it was something we knew about because it's like Don wouldn't have been there had we been sitting there waiting on Ron. So
right.
I think it's something happened where he knew he wasn't going to leave North Carolina.
I got you. Well, which makes sense. Jim, I know you've talked about this before, but I recently heard Kevin Sullivan on one of his podcasts talking about the night that Wing Kanemura got sliced up by Kevin. And I know you've talked about this, but Kevin said something that I did not know about this situation, and was that Kanemura actually had a surgeon's scalpel. I thought Kevin had just got him with the spike. That's what it looks like on TV.
Well, thank you. That's what it's supposed to look like on TV. No, the dumb fuck did it to himself. See, that's
wow. I mean, it's amazing that it looked that way because it looks like Kevin gets him with the spike, but he's actually. You're saying Kanemura cut himself with the scalpel before?
That spike was like I don't know if it wasn't this. It wasn't like you could crush it, but it was like balsa wood painted. It wasn't really metal.
Right. Well, and it had like a blunt point to it as well. So
but here's the thing. You know, Kevin has been a booker for years, and especially spent so much time in the Florida office. Knew Victor Quinones, who was a run of Puerto Rico and taking guys back and forth to Japan at that point. Was working with Miguel Perez Jr. and those guys in the Puerto Rico office, and they were going to Japan. And, you know, just worldwide wrestling back in those days when you could still do such a thing.
Right.
And Kevin had mentioned, hey, these guys, it was Bill DeMott, Crash the Terminator then, later to become Hugh Morris. Crash was going to be there. Miguel Perez Jr., later of Los Boricuas. Kanemura and somebody else, and Victor were going to be in the States and was offered to come through and do the Smoky Mountain Television because then also they'd take the pictures and send them back to Japan. Well, here we are because in the wrestling papers and magazines over there, Smoky Mountain got a decent amount of coverage in Japan because there were no more American territories except Memphis, the Smoky Mountain, and WWF and WCW. And Memphis didn't use any guys that were really over in Japan, whereas I did on, you know, especially in this case, but Kevin and et cetera, and the Funks. So we got a lot of Japanese press. And Kevin says, hey, Jimmy. I'm trying to do Kevin again. Hey, Jimmy. To get the spike over this Kanemura, he blades his arm. And I said, what? Because I knew the Sheik had bladed the arm in Japan years ago, right? But this was not, it was not only not a common practice to do that, but there was no such thing yet as this hardcore fucking wrestling where guys really got sliced up in various body parts, you know, et cetera. So I said, God damn it, what if he wants to, you know, if it's on TV, he said it'll help him in Japan because they'll print the pictures, the bloody arm, and I'm stabbing him and blah, blah, blah. It'll be big in Japan. Okay, fine. So we go to do it. And they're out there, and I see him do the spot where he's going to do it, and then I don't see any blood. And I'm like, you know, it's kind of going to be a popcorn fart. And then a minute later, I start seeing some blood. And then I'm like, oh, fuck. But apparently what happened is And once again, I was told, for all the people going, Cornette, you say you don't like all this hardcore shit. Well, we'd never done anything like that before. We're not really going to do anything like that again. Although Kevin had just stabbed Brian Lee in the head, and he got the big juice, and we put the red X over the screen, which we're going to do here.
Right.
Because we're trying to make it look even worse and use it sparingly. Anyway, what Kevin told me later was the guy, I thought he was accomplished and experienced in this, and they just said a little beep, beep, and, Lawler's done it a time or two on his arm. Jimmy Valiant's done it. I've seen it done. This fucking guy takes a surgical blade, not a, regular little fucking prepared instrument of destruction like we normally use. And when he cut, Kevin said he cut the part of his arm where he cut it like a half-inch deep and long, but it was all just fat. No blood came out, right? I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm just getting grossed out. So then he does it again, and then the shit starts bleeding afterwards. And what the fuck? Well, now, after the end of this fucking match, we get everybody back to, I'm like, Christ on a fucking cracker. What the fuck is with this? Why would he do this to himself? And Kevin's fucking flipping out, and they have to take him to the hospital. Now, I'm trying to I think we were in Sevierville, which is basically the same thing as Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, right? And if you want to go to fucking Dollywood or feed the live bears or put on the Velcro suit, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee is the place to go. It's right at the base of the Smoky Mountains. But it's not a major metropolitan fucking emergency room at the hospital. Here comes this goddamn guy that speaks almost exclusively Japanese in a goddamn wrestling outfit, soaked in fucking blood with his arm laid open from asshole to appetite, conducted in by a fucking Puerto Rican that looks like he got kicked off the set of the fucking Sopranos. And you gave a gimmick name because they didn't want to have to pay for it. And I said, well, I'm not fucking paying for that. I didn't ask him to fucking amputate his fucking arm. Right? This wasn't even my idea to begin with. I'm a victim of circumstance here. So they gave a presumed name at the Pigeon Forge Hospital and got sewed up. And he went on his merry way. I've never seen the motherfucker again. I fucking laughed about it with Miguel Perez a couple times in the WWF and fucking DeMott, but no, it was just, but apparently it got the fucking spike over with you, so it did what it was supposed to do. But
I've watched that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've watched that match. I mean, and I've never seen Kanemaru cut himself. I mean, so now I'm gonna have to go back and watch it. It's just, I guess the spike is so big, you're looking at it and it looks like it's a spike doing it. Hey, let me tell you what I even thought, Jim. I was going, like, when I heard that, I was like, so did he find a way to gimmick the spike and the scalpel is in the spike and Kevin's like, I'm serious. I'm trying to come up with a way in my mind to make it fit what I saw. And I got to go back and watch it again I've seen that a million times at this point.
Yeah, and just bear in mind that the cut is there before there's a big cut there before anything bleeds, because Kevin said it was like looking at the Grand Canyon, Jimmy.
I heard him talking about it. He's just like, man, I cut the arm and it was just like a big open gullet. I can't do it either. It was pretty amazing. Oh, the Kanemaru story. And Jim, I know you've told this story, at least part of that story, a bunch of times, but it's still amazing to me when you go back and watch it. And then Arn cuts a promo talking about it after too. We got a guy who's getting 200 stitches right now.
Yeah. Oh, that was Arn's first night in too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And he's seeing all this shit going on. He's like, what the fuck? Because he knew that was not going to be taking place in the ring with the folks that he was working with the bodies of me and Eaton and the rock and roll. But imagine if it was shocking to you. Imagine once again what it was to the fucking employees of the Pigeon Forge fucking General Hospital. Not to mention we were at the fucking Sevierville High School there. I think the fire department was probably the ones that carted them away to the hospital.
There's a lady in the front row, and she's turned to the side like, Jesus, help me. Like
it burns.
There's kids standing there, too. It's pretty unreal. Oh boy, yeah, that was a moment. Hey, look, I've kept this away from
Family entertainment.
family entertainment. Do you recall what we were talking earlier about the Armstrong's Army in the build up to that? Do you remember the scene where Bullet Bob is training the rock and roll and the Armstrong boys
In the woods.
in the well, as he said, in the jungles of Africa? Or
Yeah,
as Dutch said,
no,
Dutch
it was
said
the
that. I'm
jungles.
sorry.
It was the jungles of Guatemala. Wasn't it? I don't know, but you know where that was, don't you?
I'm sure it was your property of some sort.
It was my backyard in Morristown.
That's what I figured. That's what I figured. I was going to ask you that.
I loved my backyard in Morristown. On the side of me, there was no house to the right of me. It was all woods up to and I lived off a little side road. So it was all woods to the right of me, and to the back of me was the Panther Creek State Park. So the Dirty White Boy video where he was in Central Park, that was my backyard.
Yes.
I think Tammy my sonny was in my backyard at some point. Or possibly I was in her backyard. No, hey, boy, hey. And Armstrong's Army, the training video, that was back there. And we were, oh my God, it was fucking hilarious. But we were, just making that. We came out and said, we're going to do a training video. And I talked to Bob for a little while, and he made a bunch of shit up, and off we went, and we shot it.
It was pretty good. Ricky and Robert have their camouflage and their faces painted. It's a pretty intense training video. Armstrong's Army was out there.
And they got
sure
the
they
picture of us, and Bob's got the chain. He puts the picture on the chain on the tree, and he beats it into pieces with the chain, and the bark's flying and everything. And then we did the Allman Brothers video or audio. Shit, I'll try this again. The video montage to the Allman Brothers music.
Yeah.
And that cost basically. I gave the camera guy $75 to come out that day, and we shot it before a show in Morristown where they were already in town. So it cost us $75 to, promote the fucking deal for 3 minutes on TV.
Crazy, man. That was it. So let me guess. Kevin Sullivan's, when he was first the master, those were filmed in the same spot when he's filming it at nighttime. Did you tell me that?
Actually, no. That was out near Brian Hildebrand's, I think, because I didn't want to build a fire in my backyard. I think I'm gonna say that Brian found that because Brian was Renfield, the one that fell out of the tree.
That's Brian Hildebrand?
That's Hildebrand. Yes, that's
I
Hildebrand.
had no idea that was Hildebrand.
Oh yes, so I had him. He was the producer for the location and everything for that, and he led us to it, and we had the whole thing, and he was Renfield.
So he's the one that's in the video going, yeah, master. Yes. That's Brian Hildebrand the whole time? I didn't know.
Yes.
Ah, shit.
An uncredited appearance by a guy who would later become a WCW superstar.
I'll be damned. Oh boy, Smoky Mountain's been so much fun. So we're up to, like I said, where
when once again, I don't mean to cut you off, but once again, we had Kevin Sullivan, we had Brian Clark, who was Night Stalker, Hildebrand was Renfield. Who was the other heel in that? Was that it wasn't a Mongolian Mauler, was it? Was it?
Yeah. For a time,
was it
for a short.
But no, I mean
period.
in that video where he fell out of the tree.
No, I think the video was just Kevin Sullivan, Night Stalker, and Hildebrand falling out of the tree. I think it was just them three.
Because two oddities looked fucking sparse, so Hildebrand, on the sperm of the moment, that's when he got that cowl, and he became the third oddity, just so that it would be a group. But anyway, once again, we did it before a show, and we had an idea of obviously what we want to talk about, and Kevin Sullivan knows how to cut a promo, so we just told him, and it cost $50 to shoot something. Now they'd have a goddamn production team, and the fucking writers would be polishing the script, and the talent would be studying whatever the fuck.
Studying the script, yep.
The Gangsters in the Graveyard, that's probably my favorite, actually, just because it was fucking funny. But we went out with a high 8 camera. I was the cameraman. I didn't even hire a guy. I could be seen with the gangsters in because we were in a graveyard. Nobody was there was going to talk, right?
Right.
So we go out there with the high 8mm fucking camera, D-Lo, Mustafa, New Jack, and my girlfriend at the time, Heather, and her cat. And we found the cemetery, and we went in, we made up the promo, and I kind of knew what shots I want to have. And since the cat wouldn't cooperate, I do the camera jiggle, and then we shoot the black cat coming out from behind that scared him away. And we just edited it in post and put Don't Fear the Reaper on the end of it. And for fucking an hour's worth of time, we had, and I actually edited the Undertaker music video myself on the offline from the WWF footage they sent me. So we had 4 minutes, 5 minutes of fucking TV promoting a couple of big weekend main events. It didn't cost anything. And it's not that fucking hard either if you have people that know what they're doing and people that know how to talk and get themselves over.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do with people who don't need a script to cut a promo. Because, I mean, you see some of the stuff we see from Kevin Sullivan. I mean, even Big Boss Man, when he comes in, it's just... You listen to those promos, Ron Wright.
Oh, Jesus Christ! But Ron could do anything at any time. But what the promos that Kevin sent in from Florida, the ones on tape where he's doing the like The Shining,
yeah,
and the fucking he's the bartender and everything. He was shooting those in Florida at home and sending them to me.
Oh, see, we thought he may have been in Japan during that time, and that's why he wasn't. That's why he wasn't on the TV.
He had a friend of his with a camera. They come over to him, and that's when he was with Nancy. I think Nancy may have had her back to the camera in one of them.
Okay.
But his friend would shoot him at his house. He'd mail them up to me. So it cost, and next time I saw him, I'd give him $5 for postage or whatever. That was the production budget we had in that. But I let him make up whatever the fuck. He knew what we wanted him to talk about and what the match was coming up. And I said, you do your thing. Send whatever the fuck you want.
I'll be damned. That's what you do. That's how you be creative and make it work. Nothing wrong with that. Hey, Jim, I did want to ask you about one Mid-South question as we're getting close to wrapping up. Many people know of the feud between the Midnight Express and Rock and Roll Express in Mid-South and the NWA. But if you're kind of like me and you remember the feud between you, the Midnight Express, against Magnum TA and Mr. Wrestling 2 before the Rock and Roll came in, can you talk about that feud a little and how important it would have been since, that was just when y'all were just coming in, right?
Yes, that was the first program that we had when we came into Mid-South. And it was actually, you're right. Everybody talks about Midnight and Rock and Roll and the matches. But the matches with 2 and TA in their own way were in some cases wilder. 2 was really underrated as a worker. Of course, he reason why he had the mask on to begin with is because facially Johnny Walker looked very old. And he was near the end of his career at that point. I guess he was in his early 50s by then. But with the mask on, he was ageless, and he was a really good worker and good at firing people up. And as babyface, he could either sell or he could make comebacks, whatever. And Magnum was really over, and the people were into him. And even though he was not a smooth worker at that point, he was really athletic. And so the matches were able to be convincing. And we got the boost coming in because all of a sudden, not only Watts loved the Midnight Express, Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey as a working tag team. He loved their work. But Bill Dundee being the booker allowed us to come in with Memphis Angles and Tennessee Heat. And I've told the story about when the first time with 2 and TA, when we did the big double DQ thing where TA's leg is tied in the ropes and I'm whipping him, and Bobby and Dennis are double teaming 2 with the racket, and he's selling but fighting back but not dying, but he's down. And we're about to have a riot when Paul Bosch comes out and lays his hands on me and the place blows and he's, get out of here. And basically, Paul Bosch came in and told Bill Dundee, you can't do that Tennessee shit here. We'll have a riot. We were starting riots with these guys because the Midnight, just the style that they had, and with me there, and they, half the fans in the audience, they wanted to kill me because look at me compared to Skandor Akbar. They knew Akbar'd drop them with one shot. They could rip me limb from limb. So I was, a prime target.
Jim, so, I was an 8-year-old kid at that point, and let me tell you something. Akbar was there, and when he leaves and you come in, I wanted you dead. I hated you with a passion. And I had an uncle who was really into wrestling, and he was in his 40s at that point, and he hated you. He wanted you dead. If he could have snuck a gun into an arena, I mean, he's like, I hate that bastard, that son of a bitch. And he swore every time he saw you on TV, he's got lead in that goddamn tennis racket. I know he does. Right.
Actually, it was steel.
Right.
Well, and here's the thing. Also, it was a perfect situation all around. But to your question, with 2 and TA, yes, the matches were great. The heat was off the charts, and we got. See, a lot of people don't remember. They remember once again, Midnight Rock and Roll drew money. The Midnight Express versus Wrestling 2 and Magnum TA, by the second time that we went around in the rematches, the houses were tripled in a lot of the major towns from what they had been in November and December right before we came in. It instantly started, picking up. And then when we got with Watts, it blew the roof off. And then we still had enough steam afterwards for the rock and roll. But with 2 and TA, it really kicked us off the right way. And it was good that we came in and beat somebody that was already over in the territory, rather than immediately going to the rock and roll and both teams being new together. You always need to beat somebody that's established. And that's what we did. We got over 2 and TA, and then they got out of it gracefully without a rebuttal, because that's when 2 turned heel on TA.
Right.
Gave them a reason to be occupied, so that TA didn't look bad for not coming back after the Midnight Express. It was a very seamless transition. But
yeah.
But I mean, and with Mid-South Wrestling, you had several different distinct demographics to get heat with. In Oklahoma, I remember talking about Dr. Death Steve Williams. You know what? Dr. Death Steve Williams, all he was one of those guys from the University of Oklahoma. He was one of those pampered athletes where the professors and the teachers and the coaches literally took him by the hand or by the nose or by the ear and led him through all of his courses, because he couldn't spell cat if you spotted him the C. He's a complete idiot, buffoon. He won a medal. He won a gold medal. He went and had it bronzed, right? He won his letter in football. Somebody had to read it to him. He's just like the rest of all those Oklahoma rednecks up there. They're illiterate and they can't spell and they don't wash, whatever. Or in Houston, I'm surprised I wasn't knifed, because, when we worked with Hector Guerrero and Jose Martinez, El Bracero, right? The Brave or whatever.
Right.
I say, you know what? The reason why these guys asked for this match, because we went in one of this low-down flop house Mexican restaurant out there in Houston last time we were there, and those two were there working as waiters. And we complained because there was a fly in our soup, and they had to go back and do those dishes, those two little waiters in that Mexican restaurant. I just racist shit, right? And in Mississippi, the PYT Express. Coco wearing fucking Norvell Osser. I said, Norvell Osser, you got a nose they could flip quarters in from 25 feet.
Jesus.
I said on TV, we're going to read you Roots backwards so it's got a happy ending.
Oh my God.
And what is the Mississippi is what? At least 60-70% Jackson, the African American, right?
Yeah.
I had in each state, I had a different demographic that I could incense to want to kill me on major broadcast television stations on a weekly basis. And that's why that we were able to draw all that fucking money and make all that money, because you could still do that back then. But as long as it didn't get us kicked off television, because I'm 23 years old and I'm getting a main event at the Superdome. I'm main eventing a major wrestling territory and making $100,000 a year. What the? You think I'm not going to? Fuck you. I'm going to get over it, right?
Well, that's what always amazed me about.
Sit back and fucking say, okay, well, thank you for the job.
That's what always amazed me about when you came in, because you were so young. And I mean, the Cowboy Bill Watts, I've never met him, but that I always saw on TV and have heard all the stories, drove such a hard bargain. I'm thinking to myself, I mean, as young as you were, God, you had to be afraid almost, like, to not make a mistake, is what I'm saying. Not afraid to do your job, afraid to not make a mistake.
Well, no, actually, I was more afraid to do my job than I was of making a mistake. I did not want to fuck up and get Bill Watts to yell at me, but I was afraid nightly doing my job. I quit the business 3 times at ringside in Tulsa alone.
Jesus.
If I would say if I get back to the locker room without being cut or stabbed or fucking hurt in a serious way, then fuck it, I'm going home. But by the time you get in the car with the boys, or you get back to the fucking hotel and get a pizza and calm down and you get the check or whatever, but no, and actually, and I'm going to say, I've said before, I was one of the only people that went the whole year. I worked for Watts a whole year without being yelled at. And actually, that's not true. He kind of halfway yelled at me in a group yell one time, but Watts never yelled at me because I just was diligent enough that I didn't fuck up. He corrected me a few times, especially the first one. And JR likes to tell a story. When I did my first set of local pre-tape interviews at Channel 3 in Shreveport one day, I come in and JR's conducting the interviews. They'd switch off JR and Reeser Bowden, right? And of course, I'm doing the Lawler and Lance Russell routine. I'm fucking assessing JR's clothes and talking about how fat he is, blah, blah, blah. And then I did last 30 seconds was about to match. And after I got finished, Watts said, okay, now, since we're not going to be booking Cornette versus Ross in the near future, do it again. Talk about your opponent. Yes, sir.
That's great. That's great. That's good stuff, Jim. Oh, man. Well, Jim, I appreciate you doing this again and spending a little time with me tonight. On the show, man. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
I was about to say, wait a minute. I thank you for adding that on the show. You just thanked me for spending a little time with you tonight.
Oh, no.
I didn't know that was a condition of getting on the air, that I had to be subject to the fucking casting couch of booking the territories here.
No, I didn't mean it like
I'll
that.
have you know I have more pride than at least if we're going to do it, I don't want everybody to know about it. So edit that off the show and we'll just keep it amongst ourselves. We'll keep it between us.
Yeah, wait, which part you want me to edit out?
Possibly the whole show from start to finish.
Damn.
Oh, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. And if anybody out there that listened to the show that loves Smoky Mountain Wrestling as much as Mike does and as much as I did, remember you can go to JimCornette.com, click on collectibles, and go right to the $10 Classic Wrestling DVD Bonanza sale, where in addition to the Wrestling Gold compilation, 10 hours of classic 70s and 80s wrestling, you can get the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Night of Legends, and a compilation of house show matches never seen on television, and a Before They Were Famous compilation while they last, because it's a warehouse find. I don't own the rights anymore, but by God, these are the 3 commercial Smoky Mountain Wrestling videotapes that were ever released, and I caught up with the fella that had them sitting in his warehouse from 2001 or whatever and made some arrangements. So when they're gone for good.
That's an incredible find. I've heard you plug that a few times, man. That's amazing that they turned up and some good stuff. And we're glad.
JimCornette.com. I always managed to dig up the good stuff. If it wasn't for me, half of the Carolinas wrestling history would be fucking gone forever. Somebody's got to build me a statue. My wife is probably going to build me a divorce if I don't go have dinner. So I'll let you get out of this gracefully.
Jim, go eat dinner. That way your wife doesn't get angry with me, and I don't, or you. And thank you again.
You're farther away than I am, so fuck you. I'm not worried about you. You
just a little bit.
I'm right here in the demilitarized zone.
There you go.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it too, man.